Louis French.
Question 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Oh my word. The rules are up.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'll answer questions 2 and 7 together. Our clean power mission will end our dependence on volatile fossil fuel markets, giving the British people the energy security they deserve and driving jobs and investment into our communities. We're already seeing the impact of the clean energy transition, with thousands of jobs being created across the country in CCUS, hydrogen and offshore wind, and more nationally significant solar power being approved in 8 months than the previous government managed in 14 years.
Louis French.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The London Power Tunnels project has been a positive story locally in Bexley, as National Grid has worked with the community to minimise disruption with a plan to restore the site. However, the Labour government's planning reforms have now led developers to propose 2 extensive industrial battery storage facilities on a nature conservation area and farmland locally in Bexley, which do not meet fire safety guidance. Whilst we need infrastructure, does the Minister agree that weakening greenbelt protections against residents' wishes and damaging nature in the process to meet Labour's unrealistic grid targets will result in bad developments in inappropriate places?
Well, I'm glad he draws attention to the London Power Tunnels. Both my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, and I have visited recently. They are a fantastic example of engineering and what we can achieve if we set ambitious targets in this area. I would disagree with them gently on the wider point, though, which is that we are going to have to build infrastructure across the country in order to get the benefits of the renewable energy that we're generating. Battery storage is important for that. Of course, communities have a voice through the planning system. It would be wrong for me to comment on individual applications, but we should not, and I think it's important for the honourable gentleman and his colleagues to remember that we cannot simply block every infrastructure project that needs to be built. We need to build for the economic growth of the country and for our energy security.
James Wiles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Once again, the Minister has failed to answer the question about what the estimate of costs is, but we do know the government's dogma-driven 2030 target will imposed in Walpole in my constituency and across the country against the wishes of local people, damaging our countryside and relying on Chinese supply chains that the Energy Secretary was visiting only over the weekend. So when will the government realise that their approach of ruling out underground options and attempting to buy off local communities on the cheap rather than listening to them will only drive opposition to their plans?
Well, I think once again we hear from the party opposite about all these grand plans that they wish they had done in the 14 years that they were in government, when they could have moved forward on undergrounding if they were so keen on it, but of course they did not. And look, the reality of this is that it's not for us to set forward what the design of individual projects would be, it's for individual companies. The reality of undergrounding is that it estimates 5 or 10 times more expensive to do so. And look, the bottom line of all of this is that the leader of his party earlier today was moving away from the commitments that she made on net zero. But just a few years ago, she said this, that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has made it quite clear that relying on authoritarian regimes can make it harder for us to heat our homes. They recognised then the importance of this net zero transmission. Now they're running away from how we deliver on it.
Chair of the Select Committee, Bill Lesterson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The electricity bills in the UK are the highest in Europe compared to gas. Evidence of the Select Committee suggests that the government is absolutely right to reduce their reliance on fossil fuels, and it's a shame that some members opposite have abandoned an evidence-informed approach to policy making. But can the Minister confirm whether the government is considering rebalancing the infrastructure levies on our energy bills as a way of reducing those electricity bills and as in the immediate future and as a down payment towards 2030 and beyond?
Well, the Chair of the Select Committee makes an important point, and along with my honourable friend, the Minister for Consumers, we are looking at all options, because it is important that we bring down bills, that we're building the energy system that protects us from the volatile fossil fuels in the future. And so we will look at all options. There are trade-offs to be made with rebalancing that we need to be aware of, in particular whether a diminishing number of gas customers can pay bills if we were to transfer levies. But we're looking at all options, and of course we're also looking at how we review with Ofgem the wider question around standing charges to make sure we bring down bills. But he's right to say that the journey that we are on, that the party opposite used to be on, that there used to be consensus about, is that our transition to net zero is important for energy security and for the climate, but also for protecting bills in the long term.
Billington.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Minister is clearly aware of the foolhardy decision by the opposition to abandon the political consensus on net zero. I'm wondering whether he has made an assessment of the cost to the consumer of pursuing this disastrous path, locking us into our dependence on polluting fossil fuels, volatile oil and gas prices, and the whims of foreign dictators.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, of course, and it is important for us to recognise that where once there was consensus in this country on how we tackle the climate crisis, but also crucially how we deliver the economic and industrial advantage, that consensus today seems to have splintered by the party opposite. And of course, it was only 2 years ago that the leader of that party made, I think, a very important point, and I agree with her very strongly here, when she said, if we get our strategy wrong, we risk being left on the back foot as other countries seize the advantage. Well, the party opposite now wishes us to be in the back foot. We are determined that we will drive forward because it is the best policy for consumers, for our economic growth and for energy security.
Shadow Minister Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The government's rush to decarbonise the grid means more hidden costs, more curtailment payments, more balancing payments, more subsidy and a higher carbon price. So can the Minister guarantee for the remainder of this Parliament that our carbon price will remain lower than the European price?
Well, I think the honourable gentleman knows more than anyone, actually, about the previous work that the previous Prime Minister Theresa May did in this area, the work that, of course, his party is now moving away from quite rapidly. They were right then. And look, the truth of this whole question is that the only way for us to bring down bills, deliver economic growth and, yes, absolutely, tackle the economic opportunity of the future is for us to be on this journey together. That is something that the party opposite used to strongly believe in. We will continue in this path because it is the right thing for the country to do.
Timothy.
That was a long-winded answer, Mr Speaker, but he didn't actually address the question. And I think he just gave away that it is Labour's secret plan to increase the price of carbon. A massive rise in the carbon price, adding hundreds of pounds to family bills and decimating British industry. So given Labour's election promise to cut bills, will he take this moment, he can look up into the camera if he likes, and promise the country that by the next election, bills will be lower as they promised? Yes or no?
Well, I think, never mind long-winded answers, that was a very long-winded question, and I have not revealed any secret plans, but I think the party opposite have revealed their not-so-secret plan today, and I can tell the country it's just as disappointing as the one they rejected 7 months ago. We have been very clear that our commitment is to bring down bills. We are determined to deliver on that. But unlike the party opposite that left consumers right across this country exposed to volatile fossil fuels, where Bills is quite right to point up, bills went up and up and up when his party was in government. We will bring them down. That party wants to take us back to the fossil fuel casino, and we won't do it.
Nick Smith.
Number 3, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
With your permission, Mr Speaker, I will answer questions 3, 5 and 11 together. This Labour government has ended the historic injustice of the mine workers' pension, and at the end of November last year, the first uprated payments for the pension scheme landed for over 100,000 miners and their families. This is an average increase of 32% on their monthly payments, or an average additional £28 a week.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for her answer, but also for her hard work increasing payments to mine workers and their families across the country. After digging for coal for many years, 1,600 miners and their families have received an uplift of nearly £30 a week in my constituency of Blaenau Gwent and Rumney. However, progress is needed still on the staff superannuation scheme. Now, the trustees of this scheme confirmed to me that the average age of pensioner members is 76. So with time marching on, can the Minister please outline the next steps to help members of the staff scheme?
Can I thank him for his remarks and for his question? Of course, he's right to talk about the BC scheme. The initial focus of our work was for the mine workers pension scheme. That was in our manifesto, and it was a commitment we had to work at pace on, and we are working with the Government Actuarial Department on how the surplus sharing arrangements are going to work going forward, which is a big piece of work that is underway. But of course, he's right to point to the tens of thousands of people who are on the BC scheme. And I too have met with the trustees, and we are working as fast as we can to work through the issues associated with that scheme. The two schemes are different, they operate in different ways. Government is guarantor for both schemes, but I will be reconvening trustees to continue discussions with them to take this forward.
Okay, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the last general election, I made a promise to ex-miners in my constituency that a Labour government would deliver justice on the MPS Investment Reserve Fund and return it to its members. And I'm so delighted at the end of last year that this government has delivered, providing over a 32% boost to their pensions. Yeah. There are, however, in my constituency over 600 BCSS members who are still really concerned about this issue. I welcome the Minister's answer on that. Can she reassure them and me that the trustees will continue to update the members of that scheme? Because at the moment they are, there is a degree of uncertainty as to what progress can be made over the coming months.
Can I thank him for his question and his concern for his constituents who are on the BCSS scheme. Look, I am very receptive to calls from the BCSS trustees. I wrote to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury at the end of last year to begin discussions, and we have received a positive response from the Chief Secretary, and we are now taking the next steps to move this process forward.
Lynn Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're only partly there in the pension justice for miners. The British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme has around 40,000 members who formerly worked in mining industries, including a number of my constituents. This included many women who were amongst the lowest paid in the coal industry. My own mum worked in the pit canteen. Can I assure my constituents enrolled in the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme that transferring the £2.3 billion investment reserves to its members is a priority for this government?
Can I thank her for the question? She's right to point out that there's about 40,000 people on this scheme, and about 5,000 of them are women, unlike the Mine Workers Pension Scheme, which is the vast majority men. The two schemes are different, and they operate in a different way, because in 2015, the BCSS scheme had run two deficits, and it was at risk, and there had to be an intervention from government. So the two schemes operate differently. They have to be looked at differently. The Government Actuarial team are currently working their way through the mine workers pension process. We are now working with officials. I'm meeting with officials later today to talk about this more, to see what we need to do. I have to stress it's very complex. We're talking about billions of pounds worth of assets, but we are absolutely receptive to calls from the trustees, and I will be meeting with them again soon.
Dan Tomlinson.
Number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Sarah Stay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're driving forward at speed to deliver clean power by 2030. Last week, the government introduced a planning and infrastructure bill, which will enable the biggest expansion of the grid for generations, sweeping away the connection delays to the queue that held us back for too long under the last government, and reforming the planning system to speed up delivery. We've also laid out for the first time legislation to provide households near new or upgraded pylons £250 a year off their energy bills for 10 years as part of our commitment to deliver meaningful benefits for communities hosting clean energy infrastructure.
Dan Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that community energy has a vital role to play in the transition to cleaner and greener power? And would he accept an invitation to come to my constituency in North London to visit Community Energy Barnet, who are working on one of the largest community energy projects in the country?
I always like visiting North London, Mr. Speaker, and I would very much like to accept an invitation from my honourable friend. He makes a really serious and important point about community energy. If you look at Germany and Denmark, they have done much better on community energy than us. That's a really important role for Great British Energy, and we'll be saying more about this in the coming weeks.
Oliver Dalden.
Does the Secretary of State share my concern about reports of persistent misconduct from Drax regarding cutting down old-growth forest and burning it at that power station? To be clear, this is a company that chops down pristine forests, ships it halfway across the world to burn in the United Kingdom and claims it's sustainable? Will the Minister look again at the large amounts of subsidies that have been approved by this current government to that company?
I don't know whether the right honourable gentleman, who I have great respect for, was at my honourable friend's statement on precisely this question. He will be delighted to know that under the new arrangements that this government agreed, there's been an absolute transformation when it comes to the scale of subsidy to DRACs. It's halved in terms of the impact on bills, with a windfall tax. I'm sure he's in favour of a windfall tax when their profits go above a certain level, and much, much higher standards of sustainability. We should take these issues seriously. He's right about that.
Whereas, Mr. Speaker, they abandoned the economy, the NHS, the justice system and immigration. Now the Conservative Party is joining the dunce corner inhabited by their reform collaborators and other climate change deniers. Does the Minister agree with me that, unlike this government, which recognises the 2030 triple benefit of energy security, transition to renewables and job creation, the Conservative Party has no solutions to 21st century Britain?
I mean, my honourable friend shouldn't be so shy and retiring, in my view, Mr. Speaker. I think my honourable friend makes a really important point. I listened to the interim Shadow Secretary of State on the radio this morning, and he made net zero 2050 sound like a target dreamed up by me. It wasn't dreamed up by me. It was Theresa May, the former Conservative Prime Minister, when he was the PPS who legislated, when he was the PPS, he was supposed to be the man implementing it, legislated for net zero by 2050. Why? It's the right thing to do, so we can have clean homegrown energy, so we can get the jobs, and so we can protect future generations.
Seamus Logan.
Mr. Speaker, the plans for a green generator at the Peterhead power station in my constituency are shovel-ready, but they depend on approval for the Acorn project at St Fergus. On November the 12th last year, the Minister stated in response to a question from me that the Track 2 projects, that would be more information available in coming months. So given that 4 months have now passed, can the Minister provide an updated timescale on outlining what these next steps are?
Yes, look, I support the Acorn project. It is a really, really important project. The right place to make decisions for this, is for the reasons he will understand, will be at the spending review in June.
Sarah Edwards.
Question number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we know that people are worried about their energy bills and that too many are struggling to afford them. That's why we agreed £500 million of industry support alongside our Warm Homes discount to ensure that £1 billion of support was available for households that are struggling with their energy bills this winter. We will continue to take action to support consumers in the short term as we sprint towards clean power in order to bear down on energy bills for good.
Sarah Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency, a local hospitality business's energy provider, E.ON, has behaved appallingly, back-billing and incorrectly billing, leaving them nearly bankrupt. Whilst I welcome the new expanded remit of the Energy Ombudsman, we need to ensure that they have the capacity and the powers to protect businesses. Would the Minister meet with me to discuss this case, and can they outline what the government is doing to ensure that our local businesses are not driven to bankruptcy by outrageous behaviour of energy suppliers?
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to meet with my honourable friend to discuss this case, but let me be very clear about this. There are clear rules in place to protect consumers from unfair back billing, and energy companies must comply with these rules. I've met with Energy UK, the industry body, and Ofgem in order to reinforce our expectation that if rules are not complied with, Ofgem will take enforcement action. But look, there is a broader point, Mr. Speaker, which is that we have to ensure that the energy market is working for consumers and is fair. And that's why we're reviewing Ofgem to ensure that it has the mandate, the duties, the powers, including the Energy Ombudsman, in order to be an effective and strong consumer champion.
George Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the record, I and my constituents are proud of the southern North Sea development as the largest wind farm in the world under the last government. But what we are not happy about is this government's rush to force our consumers to pay higher bills, see a very, very important agricultural area of Norfolk turned at vast subsidy into farmers farming solar panels rather than the food and the security, the affordability we need, abandoning agricultural leadership in net zero. Can she reassure my consumers that £250 is an adequate compensation for higher bills and the defoliation of a large part of Norfolk in her rush for ill-thought-out net zero targets set in London without any consideration of local people?
Mr. Speaker, the last few years have shown us why we must absolutely break our reliance on global fossil fuel markets. Under that government's watch, energy prices spiralled, and it's consumers across the countries that were paying the price. Now, that is a reality that side of the party is happy with and was happy to contend with. It is not a reality that we think is tenable. So we will sprint to clean power, because that is the route by which we determine and achieve energy security for the country and financial security for family finances. We are on the right side of history. We are on the side of consumers. They are deluded.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Blackpool, we have over 250 charities doing incredible work supporting people with mental health, getting back to work, but also cost of living. But too many tell me week in, week out, they can't afford to pay the bills. Can I ask the Minister what conversations she's had with the energy companies about supporting these charities, and will she agree with me, to meet with me to discuss this important issue?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. Charities and third sector organisations play an absolutely vital role in getting support to households that we know are struggling with bills. Part of the reason why we thought it was so important to agree that £500 million of industry support is to make sure that we were getting additional support to households. We are also consulting on extending our warm homes discount to 2.7 million households, so that over 6 million people will be getting help. And we will work with the energy sector to make sure that we are using the vital network of charities in order to get that support to the households that need it.
Richard Tash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The price of gas is some 20% lower than it was at the beginning of this year, and yet the Secretary of State promised the bills would come down. So, can the Secretary of State confirm when will the bills come down for consumers compared to the fact they're going up by 6% on the 1st of April?
Mr. Speaker, I would encourage the honourable gentleman to check his facts. The price cap went up, which was disappointing for families, and the reason it went up was because of the spike in wholesale prices. It is because of our reliance on global fossil fuel prices. I will say it incredibly slowly for him so he can understand. It is because of our reliance on global fossil fuel markets. That is why we must break that reliance. We have to wean ourselves off this roller coaster of price spikes and price falls that is harming consumers across the country. The sprint to clean power will achieve that. It's a shame that he cannot see that.
Can the Minister, John Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Consumers are concerned about the rising energy cap. What will the Secretary of State do to further strengthen existing energy schemes and initiate new schemes? And will this include delivering the £300 reduction in energy bills that the party opposite promised for the general election?
Mr. Speaker, we know that households are struggling with bills. We know that households are worried with bills. That's why we are doing everything that we can to bear down on bills. We are doing it not just because it's a manifesto commitment, but absolutely because it matters to households across the country. And whilst we make that sprint to clean power, which we are very clear is the route in which we bear down on bills, we will do the job of supporting households. So whether that is the agreement we agreed with energy suppliers, 500 million, whether that's the extension of the warm homes discount to over 6 million households, whether that is the debt support that we're providing for consumers that gained energy debt, we are taking short-term action. But let me be clear, the way we get ourselves out of this bind is to deliver clean power for consumers across the country.
I'll pick up.
Question number 8, Mr. Speaker.
Start.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for her continued interest in this very important question. Despite significant challenges, COP29 agreed a new climate finance goal and finalised guidance on international carbon markets. We would have liked to have seen more progress in certain areas like mitigation outcomes, and we're now looking forward to playing a very important role in the run-up to COP30 in Berlin to ensure more progress is made.
Please,
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Speaker, tackling climate change should matter to all of us because it affects all of us. The UK has led the way in setting strong climate targets at COP29. So how is the Minister ensuring measures are in place to track progress against our COP commitments? And how is she working with businesses, local authorities and industry to deliver on those targets and drive investment? Thank you.
My honourable friend is right. We earn the credibility to show international leadership by delivering at home. We will publish a cross-economy plan on how we will meet our climate targets in due course, including outlining the policies needed to meet our 2035 NDC. We're engaging with a range of stakeholders on delivery, including through the Net Zero Council, which has a very busy work programme, and through the local Net Zero Delivery Group.
James Shaw.
Speaker, and thank the Minister for that answer. Can I ask the Minister this? What assessment has the Minister made of the COP29 commitment to triple finance to developing countries from the previous goal of $100 billion to the $300 billion annually by 2035? And can I ask, what is the UK's contribution to this money?
Good question.
Always a pleasure to answer questions from the honourable member. We do remain committed to international climate finance and to the new climate finance goal agreed at COP29, and the level of the UK's contribution will be considered as part of the spending review. We'll be looking at how we can maximise investment from the private sector.
Matthew Patrick.
Question number 9, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer 9 and 19 together. The £21.7 billion of funding we committed to in October will kickstart the CCUS industry, supporting thousands of jobs in our industrial heartlands through the East Coast and High Net clusters. We continue to engage with important future projects such as Acorn in Scotland and Viking in the Humber, and will make further announcements following the spending review.
Matthew Patrick.
I thank my friend for his answer. He will recognise that Merseyside is a clean energy pioneer, a hub of carbon capture and hydrogen technology. The climate emergency is the challenge of our generation, and it will only be met through the collective endeavour of communities across our country, including mine in Wirral West. Can he set out how the government is supporting our communities to deliver good local energy projects?
Well, my honourable friend is entirely right about this, and I think what we've learnt over the last decade and more is that this is the biggest jobs opportunity of the 21st century. And nowhere is it more true than in the investments we're making in CCUS, and I am confident that members of his constituency will benefit. And the context of this, Mr. Speaker, is this, which is the CBI came out with a very important report a couple of weeks ago, and it showed that the net zero economy grew 3 times faster than the economy as a whole last year. And the whole House should let that sink in, because what that tells you is that if you turn your back on the net zero economy, you turn your back on business, you turn your back on jobs, and you turn your back on investment.
Richard Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree there is huge potential for carbon capture and storage to play a key role in our green energy ambitions for Scotland? And as we look towards the spending review, does he agree the Acorn project presents an excellent and efficient opportunity to invest in CCUS and to reduce the carbon impacts of industries across Scotland, as it will repurpose existing pipelines?
Well, look, I congratulate my honourable friend, who is a fantastic advocate for this project, and we are hugely supportive of the Acorn project. Track 1 projects were agreed in the budget last year at a fiscal event, a fiscal moment, and the work we are currently doing in government is to look at these projects for the next phase, if you like, of the spending review, which will come in June. But I don't think anyone is in any doubt about the potential value of the Acorn project, not just to Scotland, but the whole of the United Kingdom.
Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, nobody who cares about the future of our children and our grandchildren would gainsay the importance of carbon capture. But does the Secretary of State not understand that he's undermining that good work by, notwithstanding his answer to my right honourable friend, continuing to subsidise the Drax power station, which is cutting down forests in Canada, turning the wood into pellets, shipping it thousands of miles across the Atlantic to burn here? It makes a nonsense of what he's trying to achieve.
I don't agree with the honourable gentleman, for whom I have great respect. The thing I would say to him is this, that the situation we inherited from the last government meant that we had to look at issues of security of supply and issues of how we got the best deal for bill payers. And that's what we did, and that's why we made the statement we did on Drax. For the longer term, he is absolutely right that we need to move away from unabated biomass, and we need to look at all of the possibilities that we can have to ensure that we move towards net zero, and that is what this government is doing.
Yes, Brownfellow.
Mr. Speaker, will the Secretary of State join me in congratulating the 6 students from Bourne Community College that came to Westminster yesterday to present their report on the future of hydrogen storage as a net zero approach to aviation? And does he agree with me that students engaging with STEM are actually really excited by the potential of clean power and carbon capture, and properly funding STEM in our schools will provide us with the next generation of scientists and engineers to help us achieve these goals?
I warmly join the Honourable Lady in congratulating the 6 students that she mentioned from her constituency, and I'm sure that I speak for all members of the House that when we meet young people who are engaged in the potential of clean energy technologies to transform our country and our world, it is just an incredibly important reminder both about the potential this has in terms of jobs, but also our duties to those future generations.
Democrat spokesperson Edward Brother.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The IPPC has made clear that by 2050 we need to be removing 10 billion tonnes of carbon from the atmosphere every year if we are to stand a chance of keeping below the 1.5 degree target. It's clear that carbon removal, and not just carbon capture and storage, will play a critical role if we want to avoid a climate disaster. In the face of the party to my right once again embracing climate denialism, what steps will the government be taking to support the research, development and deployment of carbon removal technologies, ensuring that British companies become leaders in this emerging sector?
Well, I can thank you. I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I can tell him that my honourable friend, the Minister for Industry, did a round table with a whole range of industry voices on this precise topic last week. He is right about this, and you know there is scepticism about CCS in some parts of academia and others. All of the evidence I've seen is from the Climate Change Committee, the IPCC and others, the IEA, is that CCS technology has a crucial role to play in something like 20% of emissions, but he's also right that carbon removal, if you like, is the sort of next stage of that journey, and that is something my department is heavily engaged in.
Andrew Snowden.
Question number 10, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'll answer questions 10, 13 and 17 together. Nuclear power is at the heart of our mission to make Britain a clean energy superpower, not just providing energy security, but driving billions in investment and creating thousands of highly skilled jobs. Great British Nuclear is on track to make final decisions in its small modular reactor competition this spring, while a final investment decision on Sizewell C will be made in the spending review.
Andrew Snowden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Whether one agrees with the government's net zero targets or not, it will not be able to achieve it without the significant role that nuclear energy will play in that, which is why I was delighted that the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State chose to launch their nuclear strategy in my constituency. I can only assume my invite was lost in the post. But a key part of that is the nuclear fuel strategy in the nuclear fuel industry in this country. Because as we've seen from aggressive actions from Russia and other countries that have pushed Western commercial providers out or have dominated elements of the nuclear fuel enrichment and manufacturing market, it is ever more important for our national security that we develop that whole life cycle nuclear fuel production. So as part of the strategy, when will the government be announcing the concrete steps they will be taking to improve the whole life cycle of manufacturing of nuclear power?
The honourable gentleman makes a good point, and of course the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State and indeed the Minister for Nuclear in the other place has visited and seen the good work that is happening in his constituency, and of course I think just shy of £20 million has gone in to that work from government grants to help develop those nuclear fuels, and of course it will be part of the future. And when we are looking at whether it's the big nuclear development, Sizewell, Hinkley, whether it's the SMRs, whether it's the AMRs, you know, all of these things need to be in the mix, and he's absolutely right to make the point.
Smith.
Many of my constituents were pleased to see the extension of Hisham 1 and 2 late last year, and they'd like to see those long-term jobs for the future in the nuclear industry created in the North West. Does the Minister agree with me that it's thanks to this Labour government that we are ending the legacy of no new nuclear being built that we saw under the last government?
I completely agree with my honourable friend. The party opposite built no new nuclear in 14 years. Small modular reactors will bring energy efficiency and economic growth to many parts of this country, and under the current law, each new reactor design is classed as... I agree with my honourable friend. We are working at pace, and we will make sure that we have the answer on the SMRs shortly. We will have the answer on Sizewell in the spending review, and of course the future has to have a big part of nuclear in it.
Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, small modular reactors, as the Minister says, will play an important part in delivering clean, cheap and secure energy across this country. However, current rules require that any reactor has to apply for regulatory justification, as if nuclear power was an entirely new practice instead of an existing one. So this delays reactors getting online, lowering energy bills for people across the country, including Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket, by up to 2 years. So, will the Secretary of State consider working with her Cabinet colleagues to simplify the system, recognising nuclear energy technology is an existing practice, and therefore accelerating the deployment of small modular reactors?
I will happily investigate this issue further that my honourable friend has raised. Of course, there's two pieces of work going on in this space. There's the draft nuclear planning policy statement and there's the nuclear regulatory task force. But of course, we want to make things as easy and as we can, and I'm very happy to talk to him further.
Blackman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And small modular nuclear reactors are clearly the way forward in terms of decarbonising the grid. However, constant delays have actually held this up. So when does the Minister expect to be able to announce the first one being brought into operation, and when does she expect it actually to start work?
Well, I'm hoping we'll take less than the 14 years that the previous government failed to deliver anything. We will see the announcements on the first SMR in the spring, you know, of course, if anyone wants to build new nuclear in the country, our door is open to whatever they want to come and suggest.
Secretary of State Andrew Marr.
Mr. Speaker. On the 6th of February, the Prime Minister announced he was going to take on the blockers and build new small modular reactors. Do those blockers include those in their own government? Essential work being delayed and paused at Sellafield, possible job losses at the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, still no certainty for Sizewell C due to a general fear in the industry that the spending review will stymie the ambitions of Great British Nuclear. Isn't it quite clear the biggest blockers to new nuclear in the UK are the Labour Treasury?
I'm not sure how many times the honourable member promised that he would get to FID on Sizewell under the last government. I think at least 5 times him and his colleagues in the House, and of course that didn't happen. And I just repeat gently that the previous government managed no new nuclear in 14 years, and the Shadow Minister himself admitted that the government had moved too slowly in getting nuclear projects off the ground. We are working at pace. We will deliver the answer to the competition in the spring. Sizewell C is also moving at pace, and we will have final answers in the spending review.
We're going to run on a bit because we're really behind. We've hardly got any questions in. I'm Liz Kendall.
Question number 12, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, for this government, good paying conditions for workers and the role of trade unions must be at the heart of the renewable energy sector, but this is the only route to a fair transition. Since we came to office, EDF Renewables has announced recognition agreements with 4 major trade unions. We applaud them for their decision and want others to follow suit. Through the Office for Clean Energy Jobs, we are also working with industry and trade unions to support fair pay, terms and conditions in the sector.
And Liz Kendall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for his answer. The Employment Rights Bill is an historic step forward for workers, but these rights must go hand in hand with good jobs. So can I ask,
what action is he taking to strengthen the UK's manufacturing capacity and supply chains to ensure that communities like mine in Knowsley benefit from the transition to net zero?
Well, my honourable friend is a brilliant advocate for her constituency and on this issue of manufacturing jobs. And if you look at what this government is doing, Mr Speaker, from GB Energy to the National Wealth Fund to the Clean Industries Bonus, this is a government determined to make sure that we manufacture in Britain, we care about where things are made, and we are going to make those good manufacturing jobs happen.
Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
Number 14, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Meeting our clean power mission will require a significant increase in the deployment of both ground mount and rooftop solar projects. As well as consenting record amounts of ground-mounted solar, we want to see a much greater deployment of rooftop solar power, and we'll soon publish the solar roadmap, work which was started under the previous government to bring together our next steps in this area.
The government says that only 1% of agricultural land is going to be taken by solar farms, but in the pipeline around Gainsborough there are already 10,000 acres going to be put onto solar farms, another 4,000 announced a couple of weeks ago. Up to 15% of my constituency, the most arable, the most fertile in the country. So I just make one request to the Secretary of State. I think it's quite reasonable. When he considers these applications, we look at them in the round, not just take one individual one, but look at their cumulative effect on food production and on the local environment. Quite a reasonable request.
Well, I would just say on the question of even under the most ambitious scenarios, less than 1% of agricultural land would be occupied by solar farms. He makes a point around how these are holistically planned, and I think this is why it's so important we've taken forward strategic spatial energy planning so that we can have that coherent view of the entire energy system. It's work we should have done many, many years ago. We're now moving at pace to do that. But individual planning applications are obviously...
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Now that the party opposite oppose large-scale solar, net zero, onshore wind, I'm tempted to ask the Minister what he makes of the party opposite's new energy policy, which is to take us back to the past, rub two sticks together and hope for the best. But could I ask the Minister instead to update the House on the progress of GB Energy in delivering our clean energy mission?
Well, I think we've rehearsed the arguments about the absolute failure of the previous government for the past 14 years, and they've just gone further back on it today. But on the question of GB Energy, I was delighted to be in Aberdeen yesterday to join the board of Great British Energy for their first board meeting. The bill will soon, we hope, complete its passage through Parliament, and then it can get on with delivering for the British people.
We come to topicals. Steph Ackerman.
Thanks, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, Britain is 1% of global climate emissions. China is the world's largest emitter. Yet no UK Energy Secretary has visited in 8 years to make the case for why China needs to do more. That's why I've been in Beijing making the case for climate action, because engagement, not negligence, is what fighting for Britain looks like. On climate, as on so much else, this government believes that Britain can only protect our national interest by engaging on the international stage.
Steph Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Bacton Energy Hub in my constituency is undergoing a green transition, which I support because I believe in protecting our natural environment and boosting our economy through net zero, two things the Conservatives seem to have abandoned. Green hydrogen at Bacton needs wind power to be brought in from the coast. Will the Secretary of State help make this happen, and will he visit Bacton with me in person to see the potential for himself?
Well, this, among many others, is a very, very important potential project, and I think the honourable gentleman is right to make the case for it. Green hydrogen is absolutely part of our energy mix in the future.
Rinder Singh Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the government's commitment to nuclear energy. I recently met with representatives of Nucleo, a company developing small modular reactors using lead-cooled fast reactor technology, using depleted uranium and plutonium, materials that we have an abundance of as current waste materials from our existing nuclear programme. Can the Secretary of State detail what he's doing to ensure that the industrial strategy takes account of all aspects of the nuclear jigsaw, including the wide variety of technologies on offer?
Clean energy is one of the 8 growth sectors in the industrial strategy and will provide a core part of that strategy. And if anybody wants to build new nuclear in this country, our door is always open.
Andrew Bowish.
Mr. Speaker, last month with surprising little fanfare from the Department or the Secretary of State, the Climate Change Committee published Carbon Budget 7, and among the more eye-watering recommendations was the figure put on the cost of meeting the obligations. Mr. Speaker, it was £319 billion over the next 15 years. Front-loading, there will be a net cost to industry every year until 2050. Can I ask the Secretary of State, is this exorbitant cost the reason he cancelled his department's review into the whole system's cost of net zero commissioned by his predecessor?
Mr. Speaker, I deeply regret the direction in which the honourable gentleman is going. I think the Climate Change Committee does incredibly important work. We will look at CB7, but the biggest cost we face as a country is we do not act on the climate crisis. That is what would leave hundreds of billions of pounds of cost to future generations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, he might be content with signing our energy sovereignty over to the People's Republic of China. He might be happy with his government's arbitrary targets and bans pushing bills up, leaving us more reliant on imports and costing jobs. But we think it's time for a new approach. As the Leader of the Opposition said this morning, one focused on security and cost to the consumer and not on pie-in-the-sky targets with no plan to reach them. So will he recommission the review into the whole system's cost? And if not, what is he trying to hide?
Mr. Speaker, it is the Tory party that has an energy surrender policy, surrendering us to fossil fuel markets controlled by petrostates and dictators. They keep us locked into fossil fuels. They would threaten billions of pounds of investment in net zero, and they would and grandchildren a terrible legacy. That is the Conservative Party in 2025. Anti-jobs, anti-growth, anti-business, anti-future generations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the plans brought forward last week to provide money off for people living near new energy infrastructure? Does the Minister agree with me that this is yet another thing that the party opposite promised but never had the ability to deliver?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to say that we've moved forward on delivering that if people host important infrastructure in their constituencies, they should benefit from it. The party opposite consulted on this, like so many things they talked about and talked about and talked about, but failed to deliver in 14 years. We're moving on with delivering it.
Democrat spokesperson Edwin Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In their recent advice for the 7th Carbon Budget, the Climate Change Committee highlighted the urgency of ensuring cheaper electricity so households can transition away from gas heating. When will the government act to improve energy security and reduce costs for households who are seeking to adopt low-carbon heating by reforming policy costs on energy bills?
Mr. Speaker, as we discussed earlier in the session, I think the CCC raises an important issue that we need to look at. And the key question about this so-called rebalancing is it has to be looked at in the context of understanding the principled case, but also ensuring that if we go down that route or another route, we do so in a way that is fair. And that is the work that my department is engaged on.
On Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've met a number of families recently who are members of the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme, and I know they will welcome the comments from the Minister earlier. But as has been said, many of those residents are in their 70s and 80s. They are keen for answers. So could the Minister expand on her earlier comments to say more about what the next steps are and when my constituents might get a sense of the timeline and progress going forward?
Can I thank him for his concern for his constituents? I'm very receptive, as I said, to calls from BCSS trustees. I wrote to the Chancellor. The Chancellor sent back a positive response, and we are now taking the next steps in this process, and I will be reconvening trustees to meet and talk about it again.
Joshua Reynolds.
Mr. Speaker, Martin, a disabled resident, lives in his park home in Maidenhead. His boiler broke down 2 months ago and has faced significant challenges. Unable to apply for the boiler upgrade scheme, as park homes do not get EPCs, and the National Energy Foundation, having visited 3 weeks ago but still not providing him a response. Could the Secretary of State outline what support he can give Martin and other elderly residents without heat or hot water?
Thank you to the honourable member for that question. Look, we are very aware of the issues with park homes. There is support that is provided to park homes through industry support. As we think about how we expand the warm homes discount and the support that we provide for households that can't afford their energy, we will of course have park homes in our mind.
Chris Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree with me that crucial to achieving our world-leading net zero goals will be community ownership projects? And will the Minister come to Edinburgh to see some of the fantastic community power projects that we have there?
Yes, it sounds really good, and community energy is a crucial part of our energy future.
Trevor Lee.
The Secretary of State and their neighbours could he take a short car journey to Gainsborough to visit the new fusion site at West Burton? This is probably the most exciting development in green energy we've ever had in this country, creating unlimited jobs, unlimited green energy. Will he join me in Gainsborough?
Well, the honourable gentleman and I don't necessarily agree on everything, but on this we agree. The transformation of the West Burton site from a fossil fuel-fired power station to fusion is an incredibly exciting project, and we should all be battering for it.
Chris Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister may be aware that SSC is supporting over 1,000 new homes in rural Scotland to aid energy infrastructure development. Does he agree with me that the SNP Scottish Government's failure to get a grip on a rural housing crisis is a major barrier to infrastructure development? And will he urge SSE to expand their scheme into my constituency, where they have key projects around the communities of Cullen, Lochernhead, Tyndrum and Creanlarich?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question, and he underlines just how important it is, not just for delivering on energy projects, but the wider economic benefits that come from building infrastructure, the kind of infrastructure that the party opposite now opposes. But he's right to say that in order to deliver these projects, we also need to see investment in rural communities by the Scottish Government, and will continue to press them on those issues.
Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kent County Council plans to introduce 10,000 on-street car chargers over the next decade. For context, Kent has a population of 1.6 million people. At this rate, Kent will have burnt down by the time we all have electric on-street car charging. What can the Secretary of State do to speed this up?
Well, can I say the honourable gentleman is raising a really important issue. Rolling out this electric car infrastructure is incredibly important. If he writes to my department, we'll ensure he gets the best possible reply.
Tristan Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will ministers consider exercising the community electricity right within the 2015 Infrastructure Act to require commercial renewable energy developers to offer communities the opportunity to part-own schemes developed in their area?
So he raises a really important issue, Mr. Speaker. As a sort of energy nerd, I'm really interested in this 2015 power, which I didn't actually know about, despite my nerdery. And we are actively looking at this really important power put in place by the last government.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. In response to a written question to me last week, the Minister confirmed that no nationally significant infrastructure projects have been consented which will use greater than 50% best and most versatile agricultural land. In my constituency, the East Park Energy Solar Farm is close to 75%, but under the overarching National Policy Statement for Energy, 5.11.34 states that the Secretary of State should ensure that applicants do not site their scheme on the best and most versatile land without justification. So can the Minister confirm to me whether the nearly 1,500 acres of best and most versatile land is too much good quality agricultural land to sacrifice?
Well, the honourable gentleman will know that on any nationally significant project, it goes through a proper planning process, and it wouldn't be right for me to comment on that, but I'm sure that the decision makers will be looking closely at the issues he raised.
Brian Leishman.
Mr. Speaker, there is to be a much reduced testing process of oil at the import terminal at Grangemouth, and if this imported oil doesn't pass these reduced tests, it can't be used, leading to Scotland suffering a fuel shortage. Is the Secretary of State concerned at this?
Well, throughout, of course, the 7 months that we've been in government, we've been doing everything we can to work with the operators of the Grangemouth refinery. Of course, we were disappointed by the closure of that. We've carried out, of course, a number of pieces of work around fuel security. We're not concerned about fuel security at this point, but of course, across the whole country, it's something we keep constantly under review.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the Leader of the Opposition thinks achieving net zero is impossible without, quote, bankrupting us, for communities like Severn Beach in my constituency, investment in low-carbon energy could create valuable skilled jobs. What steps will the Government take to ensure that the area around the River Severn gets the investment it needs to realise its potential?
The honourable lady is absolutely right. The opposition is off to the wacky races, frankly. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to net zero, we on this side know, and this government knows the truth, that net zero is the economic opportunity of the 21st century, and under this government, we will seize it.
CCUS is a central plank of the Humber 2030 vision. Has the Secretary of State got any plans to meet with the Humber Energy Board, and if not, would he join me in doing so?
I talk on every day to the Honourable Lady about her constituency, and I'm very happy to meet with whoever she wants me to, because we think this is we think this is incredibly important. The opportunities for her area and the Humber are great if we can harness the talents of the people she's got in her constituency.
Adrian Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Requiring developers to include solar panels in all new homes and buildings would be extremely popular with the public and help deliver net zero targets. Could the Secretary of State give an update on his discussions with the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government on including mandatory solar as part of the Future Homes Standard?
The honourable gentleman raises an important point, and this is something that we are actively working on in government. Whatever your view on ground-mounted solar, and we on this side think ground-mounted solar has a role, we do need solar panels on rooftops. It is a really important opportunity. While we're about it, maybe the honourable gentleman can start supporting our plans on planning and infrastructure so we can build the clean energy infrastructure we need.
Jonathan Brash.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State will be aware of the ongoing work to deliver new nuclear investment in Hartlepool. Billions of pounds are on the table and jobs and skills for generations to come. Will he meet with me to discuss how we can get this deal over the line?
New nuclear is an essential part of our future energy plans, Mr. Speaker, and myself and my ministers are absolutely delighted to meet with the honourable gentleman to discuss those plans.
Stephen Flynn.
Speaker, I welcome the warm words earlier from the Secretary of State in relation to the ACOM project. How confident is he that the Chancellor is listening?
Across government, including the Chancellor and the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, and I speak as an old lag in these things, we have never had a Prime Minister and a Chancellor so enthusiastic and committed to the net zero agenda and what it can do economically for our country. And so the honourable gentleman should definitely take heart from that.
Right, final question, Luke Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Teesside is seeing thousands of jobs coming on stream in carbon capture and storage, but it seems the new energy policy from the Conservatives would put those jobs at risk. Will the Secretary of State recommit his commitment to this industry, and will he work to establish a Europe-wide CO2 market to bring in investment and jobs to our region?
My honourable friend puts it so well, Mr. Speaker. This is the economic opportunity of our time. Our investment in carbon capture and storage shows what is possible. The desperate request for attention by the opposition that we have seen today is anti-business, anti-jobs, anti-growth, anti-investment, and the wrong choice for Britain.
We'll now let the front benches change over. We continue proceedings. I'd like to pay tribute to John Parry Hemingway, the last surviving Battle of Britain pilot, who died yesterday at the age of 105. Mr. Hemingway was a teenager when he joined the RAF during the Second World War. At the age of 21, when he was a fighter pilot in the Battle of Britain. A 3-month air campaign in 1940 to protect the southern part of England and British shipping from large-scale assault by the Luftwaffe. There is no doubt that the courage and overwhelming sense of duty by the RAF pilots like Mr. Hemingway helped end the Second World War and allowed us the freedoms we enjoy today. Order, order. We now must come to the statement. Secretary of State for Works and Pensions, Liz Kendall.
Mr. Speaker, this government is ambitious for our people and our country. And we believe that unleashing the talents of the British people is the key to our future success. But the social security system we inherited from the Conservatives is failing the very people it is supposed to help and holding our country back. The facts speak for themselves. 1 in 10 people of working age now claiming a sickness or disability benefit. Almost 1 million young people not in education, employment or training. That's 1 in 8 of all our young people. 2.8 million out of work due to long-term sickness. And the number of people claiming personal independence payments set to double this decade from 2 to 4.3 million, with the growth in claims rising faster among young people and mental health conditions, and with claims up to 4 times higher in parts of the Midlands, Wales and the North, where economic demand is weakest. Places that were decimated in the 80s and 90s, written off for years by successive Tory governments and never given the chances they deserve. And the consequences of this failure are there for all to see. Millions of people who could work, trapped on benefits, denied the income, hope, dignity and self-respect that we know good work brings. And taxpayers paying millions more on the costs of failure, with spending on working age sickness and disability benefits up $20 billion since the pandemic, set to rise by a further $18 billion by the end of this Parliament to £70 billion a year. And it is not like this in most other comparable countries, where spending on these benefits since the pandemic is either stable or falling, whilst ours continues to inexorably rise. This is the legacy of 14 years of Tory failure. And today, Mr. Speaker, we say no more. Since we were elected, we have hit the ground running to get more people into good work through our plan for change. We're investing an extra £26 billion into the NHS to drive down waiting lists and get people back to health and back to work. We're improving the quality of work and making work pay with our landmark employment rights legislation and increases in the national living wage. We're creating more good jobs in every part of the country, in clean energy and through our modern industrial strategy. And we are introducing the biggest reforms to employment support in a generation with our £240 million Get Britain Working plan. Today, our Pathways to Work Green Paper sets out decisive action to fix the broken benefits system, creating a more proactive pro-work system for those who can work, and so we protect it for those who cannot work now and for the long term. Mr. Speaker, I know as a constituency MP for 14 years that there will always be people who can never work because of the severity of their disability or illness. Under this government, the social security system will always be there for people in genuine need. That is a principle we will never compromise on. But disabled people and people with health conditions who can work should have the same rights, choices and chances to work as everybody else. That principle of equality is vital too, because far from what members opposite would have you believe, many sick and disabled people want to work with the right help and support. And unlike the Conservatives, that is what we will deliver. Mr. Speaker, our first aim is to secure a decisive shift towards prevention and early intervention. Almost 4 million people are in work with a work-limiting health condition, and around 300,000 fall out of work every year. So we've got to do far more to help people stay in work and get back to work quickly, because your chances of returning are 5 times higher in the first year. Our plans to give statutory sick pay for 1 million of the lowest paid workers and more rights to flexible working will help keep more people in work. The Workwell programme is trialling new approaches, like GPs referring people to employment advisors instead of signing them off sick. And our Keep Britain Working review, led by former John Lewis boss Sir Charlie Mayfield, will set out what government and employers can do together to create healthier, more inclusive workplaces. So we help more employers offer opportunities for disabled people, including through measures like reasonable adjustments, alongside our Green Paper consultation on reforming access to work so it is fit for the future. And today, I can announce another step. Our Green Paper will consult on a major reform of contributory benefits, merging contributions-based job seekers allowance and employment support allowance into a new time-limited unemployment insurance paid at a higher rate without having to prove you cannot work in order to get it. So if you have paid into the system, You'll get stronger income protection while we help you get back on track. Our second objective is to restore trust and fairness in the benefits system by fixing the broken assessment process and tackling the perverse incentives that drive people into welfare dependency. Now, members on this side of the House have long argued that the work capability assessment is not fit for purpose. Going through the WCA is complex, time-consuming and often stressful for claimants, especially if they also have to go through the PIP assessment. And more fundamentally, it's based on a binary can-can't work divide, when we know the truth is that many people's physical and mental health conditions fluctuate. The consultation on the Conservatives' discredited WCA proposals was ruled unlawful by the courts. So today I can announce we will not go ahead with their proposals. Instead, we will scrap the WCA in 2028. In future, extra financial support for health conditions in universal credit will be available solely through the PIP assessment. So extra income is based on the impact of someone's health condition or disability, not on their capacity to work, reducing the number of assessments that people have to go through and a vital step towards de-risking work. And, Mr. Speaker, we will do more by legislating for a right to try, guaranteeing that work in and of itself will never lead to a benefit reassessment, giving people the confidence to take the plunge and try work without the fear this will put their benefits at risk. Mr. Speaker, we will also tackle the perverse financial incentives that the party opposite created, which actively encourage people into welfare dependency. The Tories ran down the value of the Universal Credit Standard Allowance. As a result, the health top-up is now worth double the standard allowance at more than £400 a month. And in 2017, they took away extra financial help for the group of people who could prepare for work. So we're left with a binary assessment of can or can't work and a clear financial incentive to define yourself as incapable of work, something the OBR, IFS and others say is a likely factor driving people onto incapacity benefits. Today, we tackle this problem head-on. We will legislate to rebalance the payments in universal credit from April next year, holding the value of the health top-up fixed in cash terms for existing claimants and reducing it for new claimants, with an additional premium for people with severe lifelong conditions that mean that they will never work, to give them the financial security they deserve. And alongside this, Mr. Speaker, we will bring in a permanent, above-inflation rise to the standard allowance in universal credit for the first time ever. A £775 annual increase in cash terms by 2029-30 and a decisive step to tackle the perverse incentives in the system. We will also fix the failing system of reassessments. The Conservatives failed to switch reassessments back on after the pandemic, so they're down by more than two-thirds, with face-to-face assessments going from 7 in 10 to only 1 in 10. We will turn these reassessments back on at scale and shift the focus back to doing more face-to-face. And we will ensure they are recorded as standard to give confidence to claimants and taxpayers that they're being done properly. And, Mr. Speaker, I can also announce for people on universal credit with the most severe disabilities and health conditions that will never improve, we want to ensure that they are never reassessed to give them the confidence and dignity they deserve. And we will fundamentally overhaul the DWP's safeguarding approach to make sure all our processes and training are of the highest quality, so we protect and support the most vulnerable people. Mr. Speaker, alongside these changes, we will also reform disability benefits so they focus support on those in greatest need and to ensure the social security system lasts for the long term into the future. Social and demographic change means more people are now living with a disability. But the increase in disability benefits is double the rate of increasing prevalence of working-age disability in the country, with claims amongst young people up 150%, for mental health conditions up 190%, and claims for learning difficulties up over 400%, according to the IFS. Every day, there are more than 1,000 new PIP awards. That's the equivalent of adding a population the size of Leicester every single year. Mr. Speaker, that is not sustainable long-term, above all for the people who depend on this support. But the Tories have no proper plan to deal with this, just yet more ill-thought-through consultations. So today I can announce this government will not bring in the Tory proposals for vouchers, because disabled people should have choice and control over their lives. We will not means test PIP, because disabled people deserve extra support, whatever their incomes. And, Mr. Speaker, I can confirm we will not freeze PIP either. Instead, our reforms will focus support on those with the greatest needs. We will legislate for a change in PIP, so people will need to score a minimum of 4 points in at least one activity to qualify for the daily living element of PIP from November 2026. This will not affect the mobility component of PIP and only relates to the daily living element. And alongside this, we will launch a review of the PIP assessment, led by my right honourable friend, the Minister for Social Security and Disability, in close consultation with disabled people, the organisations that represent them, and other experts. So we make sure PIP and the assessment process is fit for purpose now and into the future. And, Mr. Speaker, this is a significant reform package that is expected to save over £5 billion in 2029-30, and the OBR will set out their final assessment of the costings next week. Our third and final objective is to deliver personalised support to sick and disabled people who can work to get the jobs they need and deserve. We know from the last Labour government and our new deals for disabled people, young people and the long-term unemployed, the difference that proper employment support can make. And more recent evidence from the Work Choice programme and additional work coach time shows support can make a significant difference in the number of people getting work, keeping work and improving their mental health and well-being too. This Labour government believes that an active state can transform people's lives. We know this because we have done it before. So today I can announce we will invest an additional £1 billion a year for employment support, with the aim of guaranteeing high-quality, tailored and personalised support to help people on a pathway to work. The largest ever investment in opportunities to work for sick and disabled people. And alongside this, for those on the UC Health top-up, we will bring in an expectation to engage and a new support conversation to talk about people's goals and aspirations, combined with an offer of personalised health skills and employment support. And because being out of work or training when you're young is so damaging for your future prospects, we will go further. In addition to funding our youth guarantee through the £240 million Get Britain working plan, we will consult on delaying access to the health top-up in universal credit until someone is aged 22, with the savings reinvested into work support and training opportunities, so every young person is earning or learning and on a pathway to success. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives left a broken benefits system that's failing the people who depend on it and our country as a whole. The status quo is unacceptable, but it is not inevitable. We were elected on a mandate for change, to end the sticking plaster approach and tackle the root causes of problems in this country that have been ignored for too long. Because we believe in the value and potential of every single person, that we all have something positive to contribute and can make a difference, whether that's in paid work, in our families or communities, alongside our neighbours and friends. We will unleash this potential in every corner of the land, because we are as ambitious for the British people as they are for themselves. Today we take decisive action, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Helen Whately.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Right Honourable Lady for advance sight of her statement. She and I agree on one thing: the welfare bill is too high. Left unchecked, it will rise to £100 billion by the end of the decade. Spending more on sickness benefits than we do on defence is not the sign of a strong country, and this isn't just a question of money. We have 3 million working-age people not working due to ill health, not filling the roles businesses need, not contributing to our economy, not fulfilling their own potential. Now, the best way to get the welfare bill down is to get people off benefits and into work. That is what we did year after year after taking office in 2010. Despite the once-in-a-century pandemic, there were 4 million more people in employment when we left office than the mess we inherited from Labour. Before the pandemic, economic inactivity was at a historic low. But it's true that then we started to see a new phenomenon: growing numbers of people claiming sickness benefits, and particularly worryingly, young people. A system set up with good intentions to protect the most vulnerable in society had over time morphed into something broader, driven in part by a well-intentioned but not always helpful medicalisation of life's ups and downs. In government, we identified this problem. We worked up plans to tackle it, but at every point, Labour opposed them. In fact, the Chancellor said that not one single penny could be saved from benefits. So when they came into office, not only did they cancel or delay pretty much everything we handed over, they had no plans of their own. They walked into the department with empty notebooks. All they'd done in opposition is oppose, instead of the hard work of coming up with their own answers. That's why the country has had to wait another 8 months for this announcement. And in that time, taxpayers have shelled out £7 billion in extra sickness benefits. Nearly 500,000 people have been signed off sick. In fact, 60 people were signed onto sickness benefits while the Right Honourable Lady was talking. Nonetheless, I have been looking forward to hearing what she would announce today, and which of the many things briefed out to the media her spinning policy wheel would eventually land on. Governing is hard. We know that. In the last few weeks, they have made it look really hard. But nothing compared to how hard life can be for a severely disabled person. Somebody for whom getting up, getting dressed, getting breakfast, things most of us here found easy to do this morning, they find hard, if not impossible. For some people, the last few weeks has been deeply frightening. They will be glad for the uncertainty to finally be at an end. Mr. Speaker, I can genuinely say that I want the Right Honourable Lady to succeed, and I welcome her commitment today to increase the number of reassessments and that more of these will be taking place face-to-face and recorded. I welcome the investment in employment support for disabled people. And of course, I welcome her re-announcing a host of things that we were doing in government. Scrapping the work capability assessment and creating a single assessment. That is already government policy, due to come in 2026-27. Her big idea seems to be to delay this until 2028. Merging New Style JSA and ESA into a new time-limited higher rate, a proposal we worked up in government. Tightening up eligibility for PIP, a consultation we launched, and by the way, would have gone much further on. ending reassessments for people whose health conditions won't improve, we consulted on. Their right to try guarantee sounds remarkably similar to our chance to work guarantee. And of course, her continued support for Workwell, a programme I launched with the now Shadow Chancellor. In fact, the only original idea I can see in their entire announcement is increasing the rate of unemployment benefits, a Labour policy if ever I heard one. Mr. Speaker, this is a now or never chance to seize the moment, a now or never for millions of people who will otherwise be signed off for what could end up being a lifetime on benefits. But this announcement today leaves me with more questions than answers. How many people will this help back into work? By when? Surely we haven't been waiting 8 months just for another green paper. Where is the Fit Note reform crucial to stem the flow of people onto benefits? Where is the action on people being signed off sick for the everyday ups and downs of life? Why is she only planning to save $5 billion when the bill is forecast to rise to over $100 billion? And do the savings she's announcing today include the $5 billion savings we had already agreed with the OBR for reforming the work capability assessment? Because if so, she has made virtually no savings of her own. What is the saving net of the additional expenditure planned? Fundamentally, this is too little, too late. The fact is, $5 billion. The fact is, $5 billion just doesn't cut it with a bill so big going up so fast. She needed to be tougher. She should be saying, no more hard-working taxpayers funding the family next door not to work. No more free top-of-the-range cars for people who don't need them. No more sickfluencers helping people to claim money they don't need. And now, before the Right Honourable Lady puts on her angry voice and leans across the dispatch box to shout at me about 14 years, can I gently say to her that everybody in this chamber and around the country knows that we lost and they won, and now her job is to govern, and it is my job to hold her to account. Our country needs everybody who can work to work. This principle should be at the heart of our welfare system. It is good for the taxpayer, good for the economy, good for the individual and their family who benefit from the security, dignity and purpose that work brings. And it means that those who genuinely cannot work get the support they deserve. But the fact is, fewer people work under Labour. It's happened every time they've been in office, and it's already happening now. They should have taken their time in opposition to come up with some meaningful reforms. They didn't, and the country is already paying the price.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, I personally like the Honourable Lady a great deal, but her entire response seemed to be railing against her own party's failings and lamenting action her party itself failed to take. Too little, too late, it indeed will be the epitaph of the Conservative Party. One thing I do agree with is that this is a now or never moment, and I'm proud that this government is taking it, taking decisive action, ducking the challenges that have been ignored for too long. And also, I would say, Mr. Speaker, I'm not interested in being tough. This is about real people with real lives, and we have to be careful how we talk about this. I'm interested in taking the right steps to actually change the system, to transform people's lives, and crucially, to ensure that we have a social security system that lasts in future. 1 in 3 of us will have a health condition in our lifetimes. 1 in 4 of us is disabled. And unless we as a country in the welfare state, the world of work and all of our public service wake up to that fact, that welfare state that the Labour Party created will not be there for future generations, as that is what we are determined to secure. This is a substantial package of measures that will save around £5 billion by 29-30. We will have to wait till the OBR comes up with its final costings on all of this at the spring statement. But I would just leave honourable members with this. The former Chancellor George Osborne said a decade ago, governments let unemployed people get parked on disability benefits and told they would never work again. Why? Because people on disability benefits don't get counted in unemployment figures that could embarrass politicians. The Labour Party isn't embarrassed about this situation. We're ashamed of the state the Tories left the country in. We will face up to our responsibilities. It's time honourable members opposite did the same.
Chair of the Select Committee, Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for her statement. I absolutely agree. Our social security system isn't fit for purpose, and I think the measures, particularly in terms of increasing employment support by £1 billion a year, by increasing the standard allowance of universal credit, something unfortunately the opposition failed to do when they were in government, will be really, really positively felt. I also appreciate the difficult financial circumstances we face ourselves, and in spite of the £5 billion being said by the party opposite to be a huge figure, it's actually the largest cut in social security support since 2015. And I would put that there are alternative, more compassionate ways to balance the books rather than on the back of sick and disabled people. I absolutely fundamentally believe that my right honourable friend is on the right course, and I implore my party to try and get our reforms to bed in first before we look to making the cuts, a point that others have also made. There's so much evidence of the adverse effects that the party opposite had with the cuts in support and the restrictions in eligibility criteria when they were in government, including the deaths of vulnerable people. And we can't have a repeat of that. So I would be grateful if my honourable friend could, as a matter of urgency, publish the analysis that they've had on the impacts, particularly on mental health impacts, and also to give an outline of when we are expected to respond. Thank you.
I really thank my honourable friend for her response. Let me say straight off, we will be publishing the equality impact analysis and the poverty analysis alongside the spring statement. I know that she is a lifelong champion for sick and disabled people and has rightly raised concerns, including through the Select Committee, on vital issues like safeguarding, and I look forward to receiving the Select Committee's report on that to learn from the evidence they've received. I would just say that although this package is a substantial package with those estimated savings, spending on working age, sickness and disability benefits will continue to rise over this Parliament. The last forecast was that it would continue to rise by £18 billion. It is not a cut, as the Honourable Lady has said. These are really important issues. We need to work to get this right, to make sure the proper support is in place for people, and I really do genuinely look forward to working with the Select Committee to get all these proposals right.
Steve Darling, the Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would first of all like to start by thanking the Secretary of State for sharing her statement in advance. That was extremely welcome. Liberal Democrats want to see more people in work, including those with disabilities. Sadly, the significant blocker for those people getting into work is the appalling state of our health and social care system left behind by the Tories to my right in more ways than one. And we desperately need the new Labour government to drive forward with reforms that actually see an investment in our health service to improve it. The devil is in the detail of these proposals, and I do fear what we will find as we turn over rocks over the next few days, particularly for those who are most vulnerable. The Minister has described the system as a broken system, and so therefore I would like to ask the Minister how are you driving... Sorry, Chair. How is the Minister driving significant change through this? I fear that this is just tinkering around the edges where we need to see real culture change within the DWP. And also, Mr Chair, investment in our NHS is absolutely more essential.
So State.
I actually agree with the honourable gentleman. We do need extra investment in the NHS and to overhaul the culture of the DWP, and that is precisely what we are doing. We are investing an additional £26 billion into the NHS, an extra £172 million into the Disabled Facilities Grant to help disabled people live independently, £3.7 billion into social care, because that's such an important issue. We do need a decisive cultural shift in the DWP. That's why our Get Britain working plans have announced proposals to overhaul job centres. And we've also said today we need to have a fundamental look at our safeguarding approach. And I would also say this, our Pathways to Work employment support programme genuinely is that, because for some people, getting out of the house is an achievement. For others, going along to a community group, maybe doing voluntary action, getting skills, that is what we mean. And we will work closely, not only with the NHS and my right honourable friend and social care, but also voluntary organisations who have such a vital role to help people on a pathway to success.
Dave McHillier.
Mr Speaker, and I welcome my right honourable friend's commitment to making sure that no one is on the scrap heap when it comes to working, that everyone will get the support that they need. I note that she's consulting on delaying access to the health top-up in universal credit until someone is aged 22, and would be grateful if she could explain the rationale for that age and what savings she expects to make if that consultation goes forward.
So State.
My right honourable friend raises a really important issue. I would say on that, honourable members, I mean, patience is not my greatest virtue, but honourable members will need to wait until the OBR's full assessment of individual measures and the savings that they make for the spring statement. And also on the delaying access to the health top-up for those under 22, there will be a specific exemption for those who are never able to work because their disability is so severe. But this is all about matching it with our youth guarantee, announced in the Get Britain working plan, to make sure every young person is earning or learning. Because if you are not in education, employment or training when you are young, the impact can be lifelong and scarring for your health, job prospects and earnings. And so we have got to put that right.
Esther McVeigh.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How precisely will these benefit cuts be realised, given this government's anti-business budget, which has seen businesses close at the fastest rate since Labour was last in office, and of those still standing, 30% are planning to cut staff to cope with the increase in the employer's national insurance contribution? Where are the jobs? We know Labour is the party of the magic money tree. Is Labour now the party of the magic jobs tree too?
I mean, the only party that believes in magic money is members opposite, who wrote a cheque that they couldn't pay. And I would say to the honourable lady, unlike members opposite, we believe good work and good rights at work actually is of benefit to businesses, because the best businesses know it helps retain people and reduce the costs of recruitment. We are overhauling our approach with employers in the DWP, because only 1 in 6 ever uses a job centre to recruit. We want to have a single account manager for all businesses. We're going to make sure our job centres are much more embedded in their local communities, so they have detailed knowledge of individual employers. That is the way that we get Britain working and growing again.
Clive Lewis.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I ask the Minister, when they made the decision, to go down this route, did they understand the pain and difficulty that this will cause millions of people, millions of our constituents who are using food banks, who are using social supermarkets, people who are on the brink? This £5 billion cut is going to impact them more than I think her department is giving credit for. And I would like her department to be able to look my constituents in the eye when I go back to them to tell them that this is going to work for them, because as things stand, my constituents My friends, my family are very angry about this, and they do not think this is the kind of action that a Labour government takes.
I have great respect for my honourable friend, but let me just say this to him. I've spent years chairing Feeding Leicester, the programme to end hunger in my city, and I know that I can look my constituents in the eye and say to them, I know that getting more people into better paid jobs is the key to their future success. I know dealing with their mental health problems, which we know are so prevalent, is absolutely essential. We, the Labour Party, believe that if you can work, we will give you the help to get back on your feet, because that is the long-term route to tackling poverty, tackling inequality, which is what this Labour Party is all about.
Caroline Down.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Like the Honourable Lady, I was also elected in 2010, and I need to tell her that our recollections differ. Because when I came into this role after 13 years of Labour government, 7.5% of the young people in the Gosport constituency were not in education, employment or training. That was a number that was down to 3% by last year. And since they've taken office, 83,000 more people across this country of working age are now unemployed. So what I want to know from her is all the jobs that take on so many of the young people across our constituencies, from adult social care to childcare to hair and beauty, are telling me that they're not now taking on more staff as a result of her Chancellor's changes to national insurance contributions. Surely the two are mutually incompatible.
Secretary of State.
I would say to the honourable lady, unless we cut waiting times and waiting lists in the NHS so people can get back to health and back to work. That is the reason that we are investing an extra £26 billion into the NHS, and many employers have said to me that they are deeply concerned about that. And we are precisely dealing with those key sectors, health and social care, construction, all those areas where people want people with the skills to get jobs. We are overhauling our approach in DWP, setting up sector work-based academy programmes specifically tailored to employers' needs. I know there's more we need to do to work with employers to help them get people back into work, and that is what this government will deliver.
Dr. Bree-Timble.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 14 years of Conservative failure, there's a 29% employment gap and a 17% pay gap for disabled people in this country. Therefore, we must ensure that the social model of disability is central to government decision-making to achieve inclusive growth that enables disabled people to fulfil their potential. I welcome her proactive approach to reasonable adjustments and the £1 billion support package to get disabled people back into work where they can work, as well as her recognition that PIP is designed as an in-work benefit to enable people to live independently, because research shows that supportive, incentive-based approaches massively outperform cuts or sanctions in getting disabled people into sustainable employment. What work has she done to develop inclusive growth strategies across all employment sectors to close the disability employment gap and the disability pay gaps?
Secretary of State.
I absolutely agree with my right honourable friend. This is at the heart of our mission here, providing those equal rights and choices for disabled people to work as anybody else. We will be working with disabled people and the organisations that represent them to develop our pathways to work employment support so we get it right, because we won't do that unless we work closely with disabled people. And we are also working right across government. We have disability ministers in every single government department. They are driving this agenda forward, and I know that my right honourable friend will give much valued advice and help to make sure we get it right in every part of this government.
John Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Encouraging and enabling people back to work is a laudable aim, but how can the Minister assume £5 billion's worth of success in advance of actually rolling out the programme? Surely the right approach is to let the reforms generate savings naturally by a concrete reduction in need, rather than to set an arbitrary target beforehand.
We're not setting an arbitrary target. We're fixing a broken system, and we're taking action immediately, because we believe we have to both put in place that employment support, put in place the health support and social care support at the same time as fixing a broken benefit system. And I would just say to the honourable gentleman, I start first, last and always with people. What do we need to do to give people the opportunities they deserve if they can work? What do we need to do to make sure the social security system lasts in future? That is something that we cannot put off any longer, because that is not good enough for the people that we were elected to serve.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. PIP is a devolved benefit known as the Adult Disability Payment in Scotland. Can my right honourable friend assure me that she'll be working with partners, including the Scottish Government, to ensure that disabled people right across the whole of the UK get the support that they need?
Absolutely, that is very important for me personally and the government as a whole, because we want people in Scotland to have the same chances and choices to work if they can do as everybody else, and to make sure people have proper protections. That is essential for us, and I will continue to work closely with the Scottish Government, not just in my own area, but I know across the board in other government departments too.
Mark Pritchard.
Speaker. Youth unemployment stood at 642,000 as of the last quarter of 2024, a rise of 136,000 on 2023, and a youth unemployment rate of 14.8%. She mentions earlier in her statement, earn and learn. Does she agree with me that one way of perhaps attracting some people back into work is for her to have discussions with her colleague in the Ministry of Defence, the Defence Secretary? And would she agree with me that getting more young people into His Majesty's Armed Forces, Air Force, Navy, Army, would be a starting place?
I absolutely agree with the honourable gentleman. Indeed, before I was appointed to this position in opposition as a constituency MP, I have discussed with my local job centre and the Armed Forces recruitment precisely these issues, because of the really exciting careers and opportunities that are available. I think are really important for young people in my constituency and the one that he represents. And I will certainly be having more conversations with colleagues in the Ministry of Defence to make sure we put this plan into action.
Clive Effin.
Mr. Speaker, I've heard many people make a moral case for the changes that my right honourable friend has announced today. But does she agree that over the last 20 years, those people with large amounts of wealth have done extremely well, whilst average household incomes have stagnated and the standard of living for the overwhelming majority has gone down? So whilst we make a moral case for changes to the benefit system, shouldn't we also be making a case for how we tax wealth as opposed to income?
My honourable friend is right that those with the broadest shoulders should bear the biggest burden, and that's why I'm very proud that we have tackled issues like closing loopholes in the non-dom tax status, why we've looked at the profits of the energy companies and many other areas. I think that is an absolute principle of this Labour Party, of fairness in the tax system.
Stephen Flynn.
They say they won't change their fiscal rules because of their manifesto. They say they won't change their tax policies because of their manifesto. They say they won't change their position in relation to the single market because of their manifesto. Perhaps the Secretary of State could outline to me and to people right across the UK where in her manifesto it stated that they were going to take £5 billion away from disabled people.
I'm very happy to send a highlighted version of our manifesto to the honourable gentleman, where we said we would reform or replace the WCA. We said we'd make sure we dealt with backlogs in access to work. We said we'd make work pay. We said we'd invest more in the NHS. We said we'd improve employment rights. We said we'd create jobs in every part of the country. I'm very proud we're delivering on it. I just asked the honourable gentleman to take a look at what's happening in Scotland and their record there, because there's probably more they could do.
Jill German.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to hear my right honourable friend announce additional investment for high-quality, tailored and personalised support to help people on a pathway to work, and the recognition that for so many it is indeed a pathway and not just a series of referrals that just lead back to square one. So can my right honourable friend assure me that joint working with local support services like those in Clwyd North, already doing great work, will form part of this so a truly local, person-centred approach can be achieved?
Thursday.
Yes. We won't get this right unless we draw on the huge strengths of our voluntary and community organisations. You know, I have never believed that there are hard-to-reach groups. It's just we need to change what we do. And I think there's a lot we can learn from groups like the one my honourable friend suggests, because it really is a pathway to work. I think we've got to end this false divide between those who can and can't work and understand that there are steps towards a better life, and that's what this government wants to deliver.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Two practical questions. She said she's joining Job Seekers Allowance and Employment Support Allowance into a new time-limited unemployment insurance. What is that time limit? And second of all, she said an expectation on people to look for work. What happens when they don't meet that expectation, and what discipline is faced if they don't take that up?
The time limit is one of the things we're consulting on in the Green Paper, and I look forward to hearing his views about that. And in terms of the expectation to engage, it's actually very interesting when we have started to free up our work coach time, actually offer support on the phone, in person. Many people have come forward because we're trying to change the culture of that. Actually, I mean, the Conservatives always leap straight to a position where people refuse to get involved. Actually, we've got to change the culture, and I believe that is the way that we will get more people onto that pathway to success.
Lawrence Eshelin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with the Secretary of State that many disabled and sick people want to work, but the reality is cutting PIP will not address the reasons why they don't. The Secretary of State outlined the reasonable adjustment framework for disabled people's hard. It's very hard to navigate. It took me 6 months to navigate that for my member of staff in the place where we legislate. So how hard is it going to be for disabled people in the workplace to try to get those employees to make those adjustments? Can the Secretary of State outline how she's going to make sure that the workplace is ready for people accessing the workplace, and that disabled gap employment, which really, in a sense, doesn't have anything to do with benefits, but some of the reasonable adjustments that we see not happening at the moment?
I know my honourable friend is an absolute passionate advocate of these issues, and she's right. We have to do far more to work with employers to ensure that those basic reasonable adjustments need to be made. That is one of the issues that Sir Charlie Mayfield is looking at in our Keep Britain Working review, precisely because we know good employers understand the need to make these changes. I am very happy to meet with my honourable friend to go through this in more detail, because she's right. We've got to get this absolutely nailed.
Gavin Robinson.
First it was the pensioners and their winter fuel allowance, then it was the waspy women and broken promises, and now it's the sick and the vulnerable. We believe in protecting the taxpayer, but protecting those who need our support the most, and yet not a word about abuse, or not a word about those who are taking money out of the system when they are not entitled to it. Can I ask the Secretary of State how she can rationalise in her mind in this statement how she, on the one hand, accepts that people's health and their well-being can fluctuate, but on the other hand say that she's going to do away with the accumulation of points. To require an applicant to get 4 points in any one box does away with the ability to recognise that mental ill health particularly manifests itself in many different ways, and that accumulation of points has been incredibly important to get support for those who need it most. If it fluctuates, how is she doing away with that accumulation?
I would say to the honourable gentleman, there is very clear evidence that good work is good for mental health. And that is for people with anxiety and depression, but also those with more severe conditions, psychosis, schizophrenia. Really clear evidence from the NHS individual placement and support programme that you can help people get into work. That's not only better for them and their incomes, but it reduces their relapses and spending on the NHS. He asks me how I rationalise this. It's because I am not prepared to accept a system that is miserable for people. that traps them in poverty, that denies people the chances and support they deserve. And I am also not prepared to accept an inexorable rise in the cost of spending, much of which is on the cost of failure, precisely because I want to ensure the social security system lasts for the long term.
Sarah Owen.
Mr. Speaker, I think all of us on this side of the House at least understand the scale of the financial bin fire left by the previous government. But there are those that are worried and are seeking assurances at home. Of the 1 million people potentially losing disability support, what guarantees can my right honourable friend give that those that are unable to feed or toilet themselves will not lose out in personal care? And of the 1 million who can and do want to work, of course we welcome that £1 billion extra support. But how is this government going to hold uncooperative employers' feet to the fire in giving disabled people an equal chance of employment and career success?
Thursday.
I agree with my honourable friend. I know people are worried and concerned. And that is a really important issue. It's why I disagreed with the opposition spokesman saying we need to be tough. I'm not interested in that. This is real people and real lives. And I would say that the changes in PIP are not coming in immediately. They will be from November 2026 for new claimants. Those with severe conditions who will never work will be protected. If people do have a reassessment, it will be done by a fully trained assessor or a healthcare professional based on their individual needs. And in order to ensure there is greater confidence in those assessors and the decisions that are being taken, we will overhaul our safeguarding and training, and we will record those assessments as a standard, because that is absolutely essential.
So Desmond Sway.
Speaker, because working is so beneficial to mental health, will she require claimants to undertake socially useful work in order to retain their benefits?
Sarah State.
No.
There's only a few.
Neil Coyle.
Neil Coyle.
Can I thank the Secretary of State for listening to disabled people and their organisations on ending the needless, wasteful and extremely expensive repeat reassessments for those with progressive conditions. I hope it's being welcomed by those who've campaigned for that for many years. But can I ask if the Green Paper plans will include tackling the disincentives to work for disabled people and others in supported housing that mean working more than 15 hours a week can actually result in financial penalties in a system not just ignored by the party opposite, but put in place by the two parties opposite in coalition when they fumbled the universal credit introduction? Will this government fix those tax allowances to ensure that work always pays, including for disabled people in supported housing?
My right honourable friend, the Minister for Social Security and Disability, is looking at that, and I am sure he will discuss these issues with my honourable friend if he would like that.
John Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've heard nothing today that shows the government has yet listened to disabled people. Any changes to PIP should have been co-produced, but we have this week 25 disabled people's groups and charities writing to ministers begging to be included and not as an afterthought. Can the Secretary of State explain why disabled people are feeling so disregarded and scapegoated, and why impoverishing them to the tune of £5 billion is a higher priority than a simple wealth tax?
Here, here.
So State.
I mean, I think many disabled people did feel disregarded and ignored under the Conservative government. And I would say to her that on many, not all, but many aspects of what I've announced today, we will be working with disabled people and the organisations that represent them. And if she has particular issues and concerns that she would like to raise, I would be very, very happy to her if she would like to write for me or meet myself or the Minister for Social Security and Disability.
Mike Donald.
Mr. Speaker, you know that